Welcome back, everybody, to Let's Play Mega Man X2 for the Super Nintendo, and guess who got quarantined? Joy. So now I get to sit my ass on the couch and play video games for the internet for the next 2 weeks, and doing basically nothing else because, yeah. Not that I have COVID, but somebody else in my department at work did, and, yeah, not too terribly fun to contend with in any shape or capacity. So I'm going to come down here to get our next heart tank. And what we want to do is switch over to the strike chain. Is that what it's called? A lot of these weapons have the letter S in front of it, so I can't tell half the time. And then I plunge myself to my death. And that's how we do things here at Meister Gaming. We plunge ourselves to death, hoping that maybe that'll be the solution to getting past this coronavirus, because that's how a lot of us feel dealing with this fucking quarantine bullshit. So, oh boy. There we go. Like a true champion. Totally didn't take me any extra attempts to do off-screen at all. No, sirree, Bob. Or on-screen, for that matter. See, that didn't count. That absolutely did not count. We're just going to pretend that never happened, and I'm still the Mega Man X god you guys have come to love and appreciate. So, a lot of this stage is revolved around these slopes and these sliding ice boulders. So you kind of have to pay a lot of attention to your terrain and sort of anticipate where these things are going to be and plan out your movement in advance to avoid said threats. Otherwise, we'll get ran over by these said ice boulders, and you'll take not a lot of damage, but instant death. And we wouldn't want that now, would we? Watch how amazing this spin wheel is by me placing it on this helpless little mini-boss here while I don't move a muscle and just move past all of this barrage of projectiles. Hey, see? That death never happened. There's your proof right there. We can pretend none of that ever happened, and we can still consider myself a god after all of this nonsense. Oh boy. Gotta say, though, the ice physics in the X games, not even an X2 problem, but like fucking a problem with both X3 and X6, is that anytime there's like a slope or ice physics involved, it's like they have to do more than just us slipping around. We can't even like fucking jump up them like we, normally would with any other kind of surface or whatever. So not only do the slopes and ice terrain mess with our movement, they also defy the laws of physics for some ungodly reason. So this here is the helmet upgrade of X2. It's a little bit better than X1's, but that's not really saying a whole lot because X1's helmet upgrade might as well be the worst in the entire series. It's not really good outside of getting a few pickups, and this one isn't so different in that regard. Basically, how this functions is that it's basically the game's excuse for you not having to rely on a guide to get all of the expansions and upgrades in X2. It points to you within the direction of hidden pathways and stuff that you can break open with other weapons, but it doesn't tell you what to do with those said things exactly. You just kind of have to look at it and then deduce and process things from there. A-okay, is that alright? Anywho, the weapon I got from Magnet Centipede, but that I didn't seem to bring any mention to, is the Magnet Mine. This weapon kind of functions as a self-controlled-esque kind of bomb, in the sense that if you hold the up or down button, you can actually kind of guide the bomb within certain trajectories, and I kind of like this for vertical sections, I won't lie. But otherwise, I feel like this is a weapon that's kind of misplaced. As in, I think this kind of weapon would serve more use in a classic Mega Man game than it would an X game, because I feel like it's too slow for X's arsenal. I mean, for fuck's sake, he can move, he can outpace the projectile, so, yeah, not a terribly great weapon, but it's alright. I don't think it's terrible. It has its uses, but it's not something I'd go around, you know, shoving up anyone's ass anytime soon. But it's got some decent firepower. It's not exactly what I'd call a weak projectile. And that's actually considered a compliment because games like X4 kind of suffer from this issue tenfold and for the wrong reasons, so... And I kind of forgot that this thing bounces off of walls too. Might want to start using that a little bit more. But it can be kind of unwieldy too because you have to kind of give it some momentum to push it around with, otherwise it's not going to go anywhere. That feels like a completely inappropriately placed ice boulder. Like, I feel like I would have placed that at the beginning of the stage rather than, I don't know, the end. Would have been a better teaching element for sure, but I'm not a game designer, so what the fuck would I know? Anywho, this here is Crystal Snail. I think he's another good candidate to go after first because his moveset is pretty gimmicky, honestly. He's basically what I'd consider a fixed version of Brightman from Mega Man 4, as well as Armored Armadillo from X1. Basically, he'll block your attacks at random, but he doesn't have the tanky HP that Armored Armadillo has either. And those shots don't really put on any additional damage. So the only way he can really hurt you, honestly, is by ramming into you very slowly and awkwardly with his shell attack, which can be easily avoided if you can guide him correctly and just mash out of like the frozen bits he encases you in upon shooting you with a projectile. So yeah, very easy boss, honestly. A bit slower than others, but I guess that kind of makes sense because he is a snail! But yeah, pretty easy boss. Pretty easy boss indeed. His shots can be kind of tricky to lead though, but they don't really punish hard enough, I think, to really make a difference. And then at the halfway point of the fight, he starts doing this, which does a whole lot of nothing, because you'd figure this would be beneficial for him, but then it actually ends up slowing him down too, so it's almost kind of redundant. Maybe that's like inappropriately programmed. I don't really know for sure, honestly. But it's like the most useless fucking attack in the game, even including the weapon we get from him as well when we charge it up. Get out of here. I took way more damage than I have any right to during that fight, so fuck you. At least he had a good stage. Gotta love that guitar riff. Anywho, with that, we got the Crystal Hunter. It kind of functions like the Ice Beam from Metroid in the sense that if you use it against weaker or medium HP-esque enemies, it actually freezes them, and instead of it just simply freezing their actions, you can actually use them as stepping blocks that not only reach certain areas, but maneuver past them as well, and you can even wall jump off of them too, which makes it a pretty fun weapon to play around with, I'm not gonna lie, especially in the X-Hunter stages. So, very good weapon to use for speedruns, in my book. More of a utility weapon, if anything. Anywho, next up on our hit list is going to be Bubble Crab. He's going to be our underwater stage of the day. But not quite as dangerous as Launch Octopus's stage was in comparison. Gotta love that sunset, though. Gotta really appreciate the background details of X2. Very gorgeous looking game indeed. I think this is definitely one of the prettiest Mega Man games on the Super Nintendo, honestly. I don't think it's quite as detailed as 7, honestly, and mostly because like it gives the player bigger sprites to work with, and as such there's more detail to soak up and appreciate, but nonetheless, that is my opinion, and if you feel free to disagree with any of that, then I mean, I don't really care either way. I'm just going to air dash past all of this nonsense because these guys are moving a little too fast for my liking, and I'm going to show off the one time I actually find the Sonic Slicer useful, if only really because it was designed to be used for this boss, or mini-boss rather. So that was more or less the main gimmick of the stage. They explained that in further detail. Basically, you spend most of the stage chasing after it in big open areas, which makes sense because this is an underwater stage, and as such, if you've played a Mega Man game before, you'll know that it kind of affects your jump height ever so slightly. So you spend most of the stage chasing after that, and the only reward you get for beating it to the punch is another X-Hunter, which feels like a completely missed opportunity, if I'm being honest. So, yeah, not really anything worth tooting your horn over. So, the rest of the stage is more so a lot of tricky platforming, mostly because of the longer gaps than usual, and a lot of moving platforms here and there, and at the end we're greeted with a pretty tricky vertical section, if anything. The only thing I really don't like about this stage is that, depending on the perspective you happen to look at from whichever lens you have as a gamer, this is the only stage we'll have to backtrack to towards the end, and that is because we need Bubble Crab's weapon to get one of the collectible items towards the end of the stage here, and I just kind of let myself get hit by that, didn't I? Jesus fucking Christ. You know what? I don't like where you're at. Did the ceiling just kind of interrupt my move? That don't make no sense. Yeah, this vertical section can be kind of awkward, but luckily for us, it's mostly littered with inconsequential enemies. As in, like, you could probably muscle your way through it. You'll just take a few unnecessary pot shots before the boss, because Bubble Crab himself actually is a bit tricky if you don't know what to do, because you kind of have to switch up your strategy for this fight compared to most other Mavericks, especially if you're doing them Buster only. But once you get the gist of it, it's not too terribly bad. So without further ado, let's go ahead and fight them. Alrighty. So, gonna just go ahead and say this now. Lemons are really good for this boss fight. Normally, you would use the spin wheel, which actually makes a lot of sense because it does kind of grind up that bubble pretty effectively. But otherwise, it's more effective to shoot the bubble down with lemons. And I say this because, like, he can summon that shield up pretty fucking fast. Don't want to camp the walls too much, or he'll come after you with an attack that's very difficult to maneuver out of the way of, especially considering the landmines he places. I might actually end up losing this fight. What makes this fight really hard, I think, is definitely the way he can alter the water levels, and this actually kind of affects his movement in a way where you kind of have to be ready. I really don't like it when he has it super low. Whoa! What the fuck did... Oh, I got hit by the fucking mines. But yeah, the mines are definitely what hurts the most in this fight. I really don't like the mines. So, if anything, you definitely need to get rid of them as fast as you can, because it makes the fight way harder than it has any right to be. But yeah, lemons and dash shots are your friends. Oh god. And the water heights actually kind of affect like where his projectiles go too, which is another thing that can definitely throw off a lot of people. So you kind of have to adapt a lot on the fly here. I'm getting really lucky though. You really have to know when to go to the wall though, because for the most part, it's really a good idea, for the most part, to stick to the ground for this fight. Mostly because he's got a lot of options covered if you happen to wall camp, so this is definitely one of the few fights where I kind of discourage wall camping unless it's absolutely necessary. And by that, I mean get on there and get off immediately. And with that, we made the proper adaptations. And by that, I mean he didn't launch as many mines as he did in the previous fight. So, yeah, I won't lie, I kind of got a little lucky with the pattern RNG here. But, hey, adaptation is adaptation either way, so I'm not going to complain. And with that, we get my second favorite weapon in X2. This kind of functions as sort of a rapid-fire-esque weapon. That's okay. But the real winner here is the secondary charge of the move, which I'll be showing off in the next level. It's basically the rolling shield from X1 charged, except it doesn't go away if you run into a tough enemy. The way it works is that provided you have enough weapon energy, the shield will stay intact as long as it can. The thing is, though, you can't really just dash into enemies with it either. You kind of need to make sure the hitboxes of the move land. So walking and picking your hits carefully with it are key in mastering the bubble shield. Or bubble spread, or whatever. Anywho, here we are at the last stage of the game, and arguably the hardest Maverick in X2, if only really because he hits way harder than the other Mavericks for whatever ungodly reason. At least in the second half of the fight anyway. This here is the junk stage. Definitely another winner in my book here. Gonna be playing around with a lot of anti-gravity, very well hidden utility items in the works, and there's a lot going on this stage for sure. Definitely need to pick your shots in carefully. But before we continue, this is probably the most cryptic fucking like utility item in the game to even really look out for, and I really don't like that there's not a telegraph in the ground for telling us that there's something down there. Probably the one like upgrade or whatever I find offensive like trying to find. You know. Anywho, with that, we get our last armor upgrade. Basically, it functions like the one in X1 where it does nullify the damage you take a little bit by 50%. However, the real kicker here is that when you take damage, it actually fills up a meter that you can use to unleash an all-powerful Giga attack. And it's pretty awesome. And it's a feature that's retained with each and every armor we get from here on out. Well, most of them anyway. So, yeah, we pretty much have just about all of the collectibles on hand, aside from one missing sub-tank and a bubble crab stage that we'll be going after at the end of all of this. So we're going to play around with the bubble shield here and utilize our awesome mid-air air dash to speed past all of these enemies and take pot shots where it seems or is deemed unnecessary for that matter. I'm going to watch... Now, I'm going to have you guys see just how effective this thing really is. Look at that. Look at that. See, and people say the weapons in X2 are bad. Ah, please. In fact, we're going to play around with it a little bit more. It is kind of awkward to charge up, though, not going to lie. You do have to kind of wait a split second before you can actually, like, charge it up and bring in the shield. But this is going to be a very useful item for us to be using in one of the X-Hunter stages for sure. And oh! Okay, so I guess the generosity of how long that shield lasts is a little bit more generous than I thought it would be. What's down here? Oh, wow. That's... I don't like where the camera was heading there. Yeah, the anti-gravity here is a very dangerous thing to play around with, and you do not want to get grabbed by these little critters. They're a lot more deadlier than you think, and that is primarily because, if you let them grab you, then you're going to be in for one hell of a ride. They basically kind of work like the hacking abilities do of the boss from Magna Centipede stage, which is, well, Magna Centipede Doi, and that it kind of affects your abilities a little bit, if negatively. And we want their filthy paws off of us. And, oh, well, you look at that. We still got plenty of weapon energy to play around with here. Look at that. Look at that! It's a pretty good shield weapon, you just can't be super reckless with it either. You kind of have to make sure you space it accordingly so you can speed through things. So, dashing into things with it like you can with the rolling shield isn't necessarily what I'd call ideal. Get the fuck out of here, son. And with that, we've got ourselves a boss to fight. And he hits like a truck. Believe me. Wall camping is pretty good, pretty damn effective for the first portion of the fight here. At least when he's not throwing chunks of junk at us, that is. Just kind of have to pick your spots carefully. I don't think the bosses in X2 are as easily wall campable as the ones in X1 are anyway. Just gonna wait for him to do his thing. And then, even though this opens up a lot more vertical space to play around with here, I actually kind of recommend staying on the ground here and only really using the wall to get away from him. Stay away from that laser beam of death. It hurts like hell! And I timed that perfectly. Booyah! Not a terribly difficult pattern, but man, when he hits really, really hard. You just kind of have to read his movement for a lot of it, and just pick your spots on the wall to jump away from him when you can. Otherwise, staying on the ground is mostly key for this fight, for the second half of it anyway. And here we get the Silk Shot, and outside of summoning some weapon capsules in certain stages, it's not anything special. I'm sorry, X. One of the X Hunters attacked the base and took all of Zera's parts away. Yeah, this is what happens if you don't go after the X Hunters in the stages. I tracked him to location 00, the North Pole. I can't let him tamper with him, Dr. Kane. I've got to save him. Alright, and with that being said, we're going to take a quick detour to Bubble Crab stage real quick. And not accidentally go to one of the X Hunter stages, because that wouldn't be too ideal now, wouldn't it? So we're just gonna bum rush our way through here. Oh man, I could have just dashed past all of that. I could have just dashed past all of this. Man, I really do have a good sense of adaptation. I really kind of underestimate it sometimes. Sometimes you just kind of have to go in there and be reckless, you know? And the results may surprise you. But you can't do that in X3. Certainly can't do that in X3. Because I will admit, I agree that this is probably more of an X-Series problem than, like, an exclusive, like, problem with, you know, a specific X game. But I do feel like you can kind of get away with speeding through things and getting reckless here and there more than you can in classic Mega Man, which admittedly kind of makes X like the easier series to get into compared to classic Mega Man for sure, because you're not having to like space jumps accordingly to make yourself get past certain obstacles and pits and shit. So anywho, that is everything. We have the sub-tanks, all of the heart tanks, and none of Zero's parts, but we'll talk about that in a future video that has nothing / absolutely anything to do with the main playthrough of which we are currently partaking in. So, with that being said, that is going to be the end of the video. I'm going to go ahead and save. And next up is going to be the final set of stages. At least the first half of them anyway. I don't think I'm going to tackle them all in one video. Are you mad? So, see you guys then.